long-awaited one again. It has been a bit slower this time around. Just wanted to get things set up and configured on my side as well as far as possible, just to give you an idea of what we had released in the latest release. So I'll jump right in. I'll share a couple of slides just on the agenda, and then through the new release features that's been available since that Feb release that we had there. So we'll have a little bit of exploration again around the automation. So there's one or two things added there, and we'll talk specifically around the purchasing side that comes on board now. So a few changes on the delegation side of things. The AP automation has been extended to include that AP purchasing side. So I'll give you a quick overview of what that looks like, what do we need to configure, and how to get that working. There are some, I want to say, limitations or phased approach in that one, which I'll discuss as we go through that. And then also just on the AP side, additional options there for supplier-based approvals. On the financial side, we'll talk a little bit about the revenue management and how we incorporate that from other systems or external billing systems. We'll have a look at two of the early adopters there, enhanced currency support and a new affiliate entity dimension. And I'll just explain what they are. And, if your organization is in a position that you might require that, just give the account manager or your account manager a call. We can definitely look at that and try and get you onto that early adopter program as well. A few statement enhancements on the AR side, some GL updates from a journal perspective. I'll take you through that regularization of accounts. It's quite a nice feature just from a reporting perspective and what we can do there. Some new reports from a default perspective around variance analysis that we'll sort of jump into as well. And then a few of the other things, a couple of industry insights. There's also some platform updates and other updates that's quite relevant. All right, so a few things. Hopefully we'll get through all of them. But yeah, we'll jump right in and I'll take you through them. So the first side, just looking at our enhanced purchase order approval delegation. So a few things that's changed there. So they added a couple of things there for greater flexibility and managing who can approve and who can be the delegates of any of these approvers. So firstly, if we jump into Intacct, I'll show you just a couple of things there. Firstly, as always, on our release notes, you can always have access to that. So jump in, those descriptions and explanations are there, and generally some availability on what has been updated, and so some tutorial videos sometimes, and other, the step-by-step and how to get that active. From that purchasing side, I think the main thing just to mention, so on the configuration side, if we go into our approval section, that's where there's been sort of two enhancements. So one on the approval policy itself, you do have the functionality to then, if we look at a particular rule set, for instance, just edit this one. On the line level where we normally have the rule type, you can now select if it's based on a user or a user group. So obviously the manager is still there, the user level or user group. So then you can select a user group. So it doesn't just go to a single person. It could be to multiple persons, and you only maybe require one approval, for instance. The same thing has been extended. So when you're looking at the delegation, so firstly, yep, we set up the rule. Secondly, if we've got delegation, someone's away, that delegation can now also be extended a bit further, where we say, for a particular user, if, Ryan's away, we want to have that delegated to a particular user, or we can actually do that to a user group as well. So a few things there that's been updated just to enhance the ability to delegate those things out to different users or to user groups, basically. The next section is really about AP automation with the purchasing. So I'll come back to this slide. I just want to show you a couple of things in Intacct first, and then we'll talk about the slide itself. So firstly, when we start this process, there's a couple of things that needs to be set up. So initially, when AP automation was released, the functionality is there to physically email or upload a PDF or a JPEG image, for instance. the system will read that and create the invoice. Now they've extended that on the purchasing side. So the idea there is definitely looking at a bit of automation. So you'll see there's a new section that's added, and you can see there's, obviously per entity, you can set this up. Firstly, we want to activate that. And then secondly, we need to populate what our source and target entry transactions are. So, when we create those entry transactions from a purchase order perspective, if the order is there, to which transaction do we convert that to, basically? So what that target transaction is, and you can have multiple versions there, obviously per entity as well. So, you can set up different scenarios, basically utilizing different transaction types based on the entities that's there. So in essence, when we go into the automation piece around that, the idea there would be we can look at our automated, before we get there, I had a couple of examples there on my new entry transaction that I created. You can see one I've already matched. There's an invoice against that one. On this one, there's my purchase order, and that can still be converted into an invoice. So from an automation point of view, the idea behind it is within the automated transaction section, which is shared between AP and PO, I can go ahead and upload a document. Now, effectively, what that means is I can physically, again, drag and drop that in. Just want to change that to my entity, depending on where we want to do that. Obviously, we can email that in as well. So during that upload process, if I refresh this, that was a bit quick. You'll see there it is. It'll have a default transaction type. It'll do that analysis and try to match it. Now, maybe just a couple of quick points on the slide there. So the idea there is email or upload. It goes into our AP automated area, and a couple of things there. We can find a purchase order. We'll match that to the invoice. Obviously, from a vendor perspective, a GL code and dimension perspective, and identify any duplicates or exemptions that we might have. So ultimately, it creates that draft transactions. You can review and correct it. So anything that happens there, and then obviously that feeds back into the digitization, is again with that machine learning capabilities that we've got there. So a few things that happens there. Now, maybe just a bit of a caveat on what happens at this stage. Obviously, each release, there'll be new enhancements on this. Currently, it's only matching on a header level. And what that means is we've got a purchase order that's approved. It's in the system. If an invoice comes in with that order number, it will basically just convert the order into the invoice. So it wouldn't read the invoice lines per se on the purchasing side and bring that in. It'll basically look at the purchase order that was there, and will convert that whole purchase order. Okay, so next release or future updates, there'll be some additional options there where it'll look at the line matching. This is only on header level. Now, hopefully, if I've spoken enough, that might have finished, and you can see that it has done the learning. You can see that purchase order is now matched, and that new document is available. So ideally, still, it's a draft document. It's converted from a particular purchase order, so that order will be converted now. Always the attachments that we've got there, so you'll have that available if you've got that view on there as well. And then the document is converted based on what was captured on the purchase order. So that's the sort of first section there. One additional thing, if we go to the edit, so obviously we can verify everything and just post that or submit that into our approval workflow. One other option that's quite a key one, there is a change to AP purchase invoice. So if there's a transaction, or the idea there is we send these documents to a particular area. Now, one, it could be purchase related, so we always try to match that purchasing first, or it is AP, and you can just change that to an AP invoice, saying to the system, move it away from purchasing because we don't need it there. It's purely on the AP side. We don't have an approved purchase order to match this against. Okay, so you still have that ability to move that out of the section if it comes into it. So that's sort of the key part there. The idea, automating as much as possible, enhancing that process to reduce manual tasks, and it also just drives a bit more accuracy through AI and machine learning capabilities there in the end. And then one of the other ones, there's a new vendor-based routing for AP bill approvals. So, just on the AP side, so away from the purchasing side, if we go back into accounts payable, look at that configuration, there's a few things, or one thing that we need to change there. So if we look at our automation configuration on our approval policy, there is a new option there. We still have the old ones, but if we include that supplier-based approvals, you then have the ability to link that to a particular supplier, or set a rule on a supplier. So if I go away from this one, I've already enabled the rule itself. If I look at my supplier record now, I'll edit one of them. You'll see in this section on the additional information, there's now a new sort of tab available or option available, AP Purchase Invoice Approver. So you can physically select who's responsible for approving this document. The one thing that I note from the release notes, it does say that you can link a user or a group. At this stage, I was only able to select a user, so I would assume that the group part is not across AP yet, and it will be in the next one or a future one. But at this stage, you can still supply-based approval rules that you can do for those particular invoices coming in. So that was sort of the enhancement around the AP automation. Remember, the AP side is still there. The machine learning, picking up GL accounts, dimensions, and the tax codes are now enabled as well. So those pieces are available. From a revenue management perspective, now I know there's a lot of options there around contract billing and how we do revenue recognition around that. This is basically just to give an idea of, if you have an external billing system, we are still able to utilize Sage's revenue management and revenue recognition to do the revenue accounting for that. So you can bring your own billing in, it comes into the Sage billing, and then we can actually associate a revenue treatment to that. So effectively still leveraging what we've got there. From a setup perspective, with over 600 billing scenarios, or you can customize your own solution, but ultimately streamline that revenue deferral. So what that looks like. Essentially, either through accounts receivable or order entry, you'll normally have the revenue transactions that comes in. So at this stage, if you bring that in and associate that to what we say, any of our templates or categories from a revenue recognition perspective, that will still form part of our schedules that we can do. So you can then run any of the actions in there. So we can post them, hold, resume, terminate, or deliver. And I'll just do a quick preview. So anything that we've mapped across to actually do revenue recognition or have deferred revenue posted against a transaction, we can then action that based on the due date for each of those. So easy way to manage that within the application, even though you might do the billing externally. Okay. So that's the sort of update and enhancement there. We can now allocate those revenue treatments or associate that to a integrated or imported transaction coming into the application. There's a couple of early adopters available, and one of them that's been a while coming. So at this stage, unfortunately, I can't show you this one. From an early adopter, if you want to participate in that, obviously we can, get in contact with us. We'll get that set up for you and provision from Sage, and then you can start the process. So the first one here is really about funds transfer. So it's all around currency. So essentially allowing to do transactions across 3 different currencies. In this case, you can see the from account. It's a Canadian dollar account. We're transferring it to a pounds account, but my transaction is actually happening in US dollars. So that 3 transaction flow coming through. So essentially, I think currently you only have the ability to do a transaction in the currency from the source or the destination, but now you can do I would almost say unrelated currency transaction between entities with different base currencies. So exchange rates happen automatically. Obviously, you can update and you can see what the transfer amount, the amount received, and then the base currency of the USD equivalent would be for each of those transactions. The next one is quite an exciting one. So any company with multiple, or yeah, any organization with multiple entities, when we start looking at consolidation eliminations apart from that, they've introduced a new elimination or affiliate entity dimension. So ultimately what that means is, when we set up your intercompany, generally we had the due to and due from accounts. In addition to that, you can also now have, based on an entity and which affiliate, which entity we're doing, we can associate that affiliate entity dimension towards it. And that will basically just improve reporting. It'll automate some of those eliminations. So when we do the elimination or the consolidation, we can auto eliminate based on that affiliate entity that we've done. So just enhancing the capabilities there. So if someone is interested in that one, let us know. Always keen to get that going. So that will work across all the consolidation modules. So you've got the domestic consolidations where we just have one base currency or entities with the same base currency. Global consolidation where we go into multi-currency consolidation, more than one base currency in the organization. And then we also have that advanced consolidation module where that's tiered consolidation or percentage ownership. So if there's any non-controlling interest in those type of things that you need to consolidate, we can always look at that advanced consolidation for your organization and introduce these affiliate entities as part of that one. The next one is just looking at our AR statement. So a small change there, but it's effective. Going back into Intacct, just looking at my platform services, we've got our printed documents. And in this particular one, just looking at the statement, so anything that's got the statement in there, when we create that template, you now have the ability to include custom fields. So if we've enabled any custom fields on the customer record, for instance, or on invoices, those custom fields weren't available within the Word template at this point. But going forward, we can activate that. Once you go into that merge fields, you can now select those custom fields and include them on the statement then as well. So quite a, I would say, small but significant enhancement that they brought through as part of that one. Prevent direct posting to specified journals. Again, something that you would want in there. Looking at your current journals, so any of our journal transactions or journals that we set up, especially sub-module ones, we can now go into APAR and we can disable that direct posting. So it means that we can only post to this particular journal from a sub-ledger. We can't create a journal on the GL side, just on that ledger if we enable that disallow direct posting. So very important one. Just to make sure that we keep the system in sync and everything is posting from the correct areas. This is quite an interesting one. It's the reclassification of these, what they call regularization accounts. Now, in short, what it means is we've got, on our balance sheet, we've got asset and liability accounts. And ultimately, when we do reporting, we need to determine where to show that the account based on the account balance. So if we've got an asset account, but it's in its normal balance is debit, obviously. If the balance at that month end is in credit, we can actually reclassify that and show the amount where it's need to be, not as an asset, but as a liability. So as an example, take a bank account. We can set that up as a reclassification to a different account. We run the report, so there's a new report that actually shows us that negative balance as a particular point in time. And ultimately, it will move the value from the one account to the other and also have a reversal of that accrual, basically, immediately after that. So it is a draft journal, so only once you post that, it'll go into the system, but that's essentially what it does. So a couple of things there if you want to activate that. Firstly, on your GL configuration side, you would enable that option to allow the functionality to become available. And then if there's any user rights associated, bring that into account as well. On the GL account, I need to remember which one I chose. I think it was that one. There's my bank account. You'll basically then activate that as a regularization account, and we can actually specify what that reclassification account would be. So if we've got a balance on this asset account that's different to its normal balance, so you can see their normal balance is debit. So if I've got a credit balance, take that balance out of this account, move it to that account. So that's essentially what it does. And then obviously from a reporting point of view, you can pick up the details of where it needs to go from. So ultimately, when we run the process, you'll see there's a new report that comes out. We can select that. So I've got some examples back in February. When we look at our GL account filters, when I drop down, it'll only show me the accounts that's got this setting enabled. So it doesn't run it across your whole chart of accounts. You can do a range, but on all the accounts that we've set this up, you can run that. I'll just do that on my specific location. So if I view this transaction, it'll tell me, I had opening balance, at my start of my period. That's my period balance. So my closing balance is 835. And that reclassification amount is also then sitting at 835. So it means it'll move that 835 out of the account, take it to a liability, so that when we report, it's visible there. Ultimately, from a transaction point of view, this is what happens. So I've run this one. Those transactions are still in draft, but it'll create the two entries for you. So the actual reclassification and then that reversal in the next period. So looking at the entry on the 28th, it'll basically just bring in a debit to zero out the amount on that particular account, and it takes it to that reclassification account that we set up. And obviously the reversal on the other side, exactly the same, just bringing the accounts back into the original format. I've got the credit sitting in my bank account and clearing out that accrual liability that I had on that one. So just a nice way to make sure that we report on the balance of the account based on the type of account that it is as well. A couple of new variance reports that's come out. So if your company was created using any of our quick start templates, these reports will be available and you can start by installing them. So ultimately what that means is in your general ledger, if we go into our financial reporting, from your quick start library, you'll now have the visibility, any of the standard reports, but you'll see these additional variance reports at the bottom. So you can basically just click on install and it'll install that into your instance. Now, when the report comes in, there's obviously a couple of things that you can do and change on it. I've installed one of them just to give you an idea. So there's that variance analysis. I'll just run this particular one and you'll see for this particular report, it's I would say almost a real-time report to do the year-to-date tracking of your budget versus actual. So you can see year-to-date actuals, year-to-date budget, just the variance between them, year-to-date percentage variance, and then also variance against the prior year. So again, normal standard financial report that's used there, but essentially just adding some additional options there. Now it is done in one of the visual explorers, so you can see a bit of the sort of classifications there or indicators there, just how we tracking against the previous year to date actuals when we start comparing those, and the same with the percentages. So a couple of easy ways just to bring through additional information or enhanced reporting that's come out and you can install to start utilizing. A few things just on projects and grants. So if you've got the projects or grants module, a couple of updates that they've done there, especially around the billing side of things. So the first part there, looking at some new additional tabs that you can enable when we start using those. So generally, you'll see that at the end there's, project invoices, project contracts, a lot around the project management side of things, but essentially, a summary of all invoices that were processed. It can be checked from there. So just enhancing the capabilities and inquiries that you can do basically from that project overview screen, having everything there as a consolidated view and getting the detailed information out. One of the other options is just if you need to share documentation across to customers, for instance. So looking at that contract invoice that were issued out, any of that source and attachments that were added in there. As you can see in this one, I had some timesheets and expense entries. So all of those attachments, I can select and download all of them in one attachment. So it just makes the distribution a lot easier if we need to share multiple attachments to a particular customer or group of people that we want to incorporate. So it's just enhancing that document sharing capabilities and getting the selection to which ones we want to share as part of that process. There were a couple of enhancements around the platform or changes that we need to look at. So one thing that they do recommend is this email domain verification. So if you do have custom domains set up on your Intacct instance, please just do that validation. They do have a time frame there before May 25. I couldn't really see what the driver is behind that, but obviously they want to get all those domains validated, and I think part of that is it's more secure, it's more reliable. It does comply with best practice, and it also just protect your account or your domain as well from any phishing attacks that might arrive. So just have a look at that when you get there. We always provide part of that as a bit of a idea of where to find that, and you can just do the validation. So you'll see, previously you'll have authenticated domain, but just make sure that domain status is validated as well as part of this one. Another early adopter one that's been updated. So when we start looking at custom tax solutions, so anything that's outside of localized areas for Intacct, we can now customize the way the tax reporting is done. So essentially, you'll first set up whatever that tax solution is, you give it a name, and then what happens in that box. So for that box, what is my calculation or requirements? Is it just the net amount? Is it the tax amount? Is it everything, or is it a calculation? So you can determine what that looks like, and then ultimately which details to include as part of this one. So which of the codes we want to bring into that box. So it gives you a greater flexibility when it comes to the tax reporting. You can now specify what it looks like. Even on a transaction type, I didn't mention that one, but most of the time we want all the transactions, but for whatever reason, you only want the credit or debit transactions, you can specify that and get that defaulted out. One of the other things that's now available, it was an early adopter previously, your tax submission, we can now do that on custom setups as well. So generally what that means is, if we have a look at Intacct quickly on our taxes, if we look at our tax solutions, generally it would have only allowed those standard ones to be picked up. We do have the ability on our normal VAT or GST to pick up any of my custom ones. So essentially, if I go into a tax submission and look at the solution, that New Zealand one of mine will now be available as well, because it is allowing that custom tax solution be picked up as part of the submission process. So enhancements there, just to include that. And the idea behind it, obviously, was normal reporting available, but this submission, it uses the tax reporting in the background, so it groups into the relevant boxes where that early adopter becomes quite relevant again, where we can specify what needs to show up in each of those boxes. But ultimately, when we do it through the tax submission, we can mark our transactions as reported or submitted. The idea there, if there's any late transactions coming in, we can include that in the next period, so we can actually control what we've submitted to our tax authorities to ensure that nothing is missed, and all of those submitted transactions are marked and reported correctly. A few other things always enhancing. So there's new training available as well, and a couple of new videos. So always have a look at, I would almost say the homepage from Intacct side. So when you're logged in, there's a few enhanced training courses on the Sage Uni, and again, a lot of online videos available. So if there's anything that you need some info on, you know, this would be a good starting point. We go to the sort of homepage, you know, look at the video library, and you'll see there's quite a few things. So by default, it'll take the first one, and you can see there on accounts payable, there's quite a few things. The standard videos, add a supplier, add an invoice, add a recurring invoice. We'll go back, you know, there's AP automation. So there's quite a few things available already around AP automation. So anything that we bring in or enhance will be available there as well. So each module has got its own set of library or videos there that you can work through and view as well. So purchasing, again, you know, set up and configure AP automation. So just enhancing what we can do from this side. You can actually incorporate that from there. And then the other one, on-demand financial training. So all around Sage Uni. So how to get into the Sage Uni, you know, what courses are available once you got in there. So yeah, definitely explore that, and you can have a look at what comes from there. One thing I didn't add on this one, the new API is out as well. So just take a note about that. So I think they do allow about 2 years for you to convert across to that new API. So just have a look at the APIs if you've done any custom development, obviously things that we've assisted with. We'll, under your maintenance, work through that, have a look at what needs to change so that we can utilize the new API functionality as well going forward. And then one thing that we've shown a few times when we start looking at the list views, so there'll be a few of these list views that's now generally available. Looking at that, initially that was just a beta version. You can now see it's turn on that enhanced list. So that's across the lists available. It's not in the beta phase anymore. I think they've sort of refined what they wanted to do there, and that will be available. The one thing that I like from there, you know, you've got your normal view where it's list view with our advanced filtering that you can provide there. I do like this sort of left list view, especially on master data as a great example. I want to quickly, you know, filter through supplies. You can click on them and then, you know, change anything or update anything as we process through. So it's available. I think at some point they might discontinue. Oh, gone too far. I think they will probably at some stage discontinue the old lists. So it's probably a good time to start getting used to the new list view and getting that on board, converting across to that particular area as well.